Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats. Linguistic detective hats, that is. We're going to examine a truly fascinating source text that makes a pretty bold claim. It suggests that ancient Chinese written characters actually share deep, intricate parallels with the early chapters of the biblical book of Genesis. It's an incredibly captivating premise, one that bridges the ancient East and West in a way you might never have considered before.
So, here's the big mystery. The source material drops right in our laps. Can the ancient story of Genesis literally be found hidden within the strokes of Chinese characters? As we walk through this, I want us to objectively look at the author's analysis. We're exploring how two ancient cultures, totally isolated by geography and ethnicity, might just share a foundational narrative preserved right in the ink of their language. Let's dive in.
Section 1. A linguistic mystery. To even begin unlocking this puzzle, we have to talk about how Chinese logograms work. Unlike English, which uses an alphabet to spell out sounds, Chinese characters are built from smaller, fundamental building blocks called radicals. The source text argues that if we reverse engineer these ancient characters back to their original radicals, we uncover a hidden historical record. Section 2. Etymology of the first family. According to the text, the origins of the very first human family, Adam and Eve, are illustrated right in the language itself, especially in words dealing with childbearing and generations. For example, the author points us first to the ancient Chinese character for pregnant. Our text links this specific character straight back to the Genesis account. Right after Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden, they eagerly hoped for a promised son, a seed that would act as a deliverer. When you actually visually deconstruct the character for pregnant, it reveals a really fascinating combination. It takes the symbol for is and pairs it right with the symbol for son. According to our source, this literally draws a picture of a son contained within the larger figure, capturing that very first human conception and the deep longing for a male child described in Genesis. Following that Genesis timeline forward, the text then examines the character for posterity or descendants. This ties into the narrative of the rapid population boom that happened after the first family was commanded to be fruitful and multiply.
The radical breakdown here is pretty brilliant. Posterity is made up of two persons, combined with something small or tender, like a baby, plus a radical that means following one after another. The text argues this is a literal snapshot of the first couple, Adam and Eve, begetting children generation after generation.
Section 3. Righteousness and the Lamb. Now, the source material shifts gears from the family unit over to the origins of worship, showing us a complex visual etymology all about animal sacrifice and spiritual purity. To really get how these ancient peoples understood the concept of righteousness, the author asks us to look at its specific radicals. In the context of our source, this character comes straight from the original act of worship, asking for forgiveness for sin. It perfectly symbolizes the idea of a substitute, a lamb, covering the guilt of humanity.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. This symbol for righteousness features a sheep positioned directly on top of the symbol for I or me. The text suggests this is picturing a person literally kneeling beneath the Lamb of God, signifying that the Lamb alone covers the individual and brings righteousness.
Further dissection in the text gives us a pretty compelling equation. If you break down the radical for me, it's actually a composite of hand plus a lance or spear, so hand plus lance equals me. When you place that under the sheep, the text argues it becomes a deeply personal act, the slaying of the innocent lamb by my own hand using a weapon to attain that righteousness.
And check out this other fascinating parallel the text notes. Just like the Hebrew biblical requirement that sin offerings must be absolutely perfect and unblemished, the complex Chinese character for sacrificial animals includes specific radicals for ox and sheep, but it also explicitly tacks on the symbol for beautiful or unblemished. The author argues this perfectly duplicates the instructions we read in the book of Leviticus.
Section 4. The Fallen Elder Brother. Things take a bit of a darker turn here as the author explores the tragic story of Cain and Abel, filtering this infamous sibling rivalry right through the linguistics of ancient Chinese family hierarchy. In ancient Chinese culture, being the elder brother was a massive deal. It carried immense weight and respect. The character combines the radicals for a spokesman, literally a mouth, and a man. The elder brother was the family's main representative and priest, which is super similar to the rites of the firstborn in Hebrew tradition. Cain, as the eldest, would have held this highly privileged spot. But here is the real kicker for our linguistic detectives. The author draws a stark, jarring parallel by comparing this respectful character for elder brother to a second character.
This new character is phonetically identical in Chinese pronunciation, but it means something vastly different: cruel, fierce, violent, or inhuman, specifically when talking about killing.
Visually, the symbol for cruel slaps a visible mark right on top of the symbol for elder brother. Our source draws a direct, literal line from this to the book of Genesis, where God placed a mark on Cain after he murdered Abel. The author even points out that historically in China, criminals were tattooed with marks on their faces to brand them as outcasts, a custom the text theorizes stems straight from the ancient story of Cain.
Section 5. The Ancient Border Sacrifice. Let's zoom out from the microscopic strokes of a pen for a minute. The source material scales up, linking these linguistic clues to a massive, physical ritual known as the border sacrifice. At the breathtaking Temple of Heaven in Peking, a highly solemn, completely imageless rite was performed by the Chinese emperor. The text pulls a quote describing this ceremony, noting that a bullock was offered as a burnt sacrifice, while the master of the empire prostrated himself before the spirit of the universe. The author argues this ritual remarkably mirrors ancient Hebrew worship practices.
The source lines up some really striking parallels between this Chinese ceremony and the Hebrew sacrificial system. We're talking strict monotheism, worshiping one supreme God without any idols, the use of unblemished animals, and even the exact same timing. Both cultures observed morning sacrifices right around 9 to 11 a.m., plus evening sacrifices. That is a profound synchronization.
To verify these connections even further, the author looks at the phonetics of the deity being worshipped. The ancient Chinese name for the supreme god, the heavenly ruler, is ShangTi. The text compares this directly to the Hebrew name for God, Shaddai. Say them together: ShangTi, Shaddai. The source suggests they share a common linguistic and historical root.
Now, what makes this incredibly compelling, according to the text, is the timeline: 4,500 years. The author emphasizes the miraculous survival of this border sacrifice ritual, which was faithfully practiced by Chinese emperors, stretching all the way back into antiquity and continuing right up until the early 20th century.
So the author's main takeaway here is that these preserved details of worship act like a time capsule. Even though the original, deepest significance of the sacrifice was eventually lost to the Chinese over millennia, the mere fact that the ritual survived serves as a massive bridge binding two completely distinct ancient peoples together. So, I'm going to leave you to ponder this remarkable final question. How did two ancient cultures, totally separated by massive geography and ethnicity, preserve such strikingly identical linguistic and ritualistic details? The source text challenges us to look way past modern borders and ask if the historical roots of Genesis truly extend deep into the ancient East. Thank you for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning and keep asking those great questions.